My name is David Hernandez. I'm a 41-year-old restaurant owner from Austin, Texas. 15 years ago, my wife Sophia and I opened our first restaurant with nothing but a dream and her unwavering support. So when I planned a special anniversary dinner to celebrate everything we'd built, our marriage, our business, our future, I never imagined she'd use that night to humiliate me. I reserved the private dining room in our flagship restaurant. I picked her favorite wine, her favorite flowers. I even agreed when she said she wanted to invite her business mentor, a man named Julian. She smiled when she said he helped her see the bigger picture. I didn't know then just how big that picture was. What Sophia didn't know was that I already knew everything. The secret meetings, the wine cellar rendezvous, the private lawyer consultations behind my back. So instead of showing up to dinner with my heart on my sleeve, I sent someone else. Someone with a folder of documents. Someone who came with facts, not flowers. And when Sophia saw who was sitting at that table instead of me, she finally understood what it meant to be outplayed. What would you do if your partner invited their lover to your anniversary dinner? Tell me in the comments, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris because stories like this one, they're just getting started. 15 years ago, I wasn't a restaurant owner, I was just a line cook. With calloused hands, a beat-up car, and a dream I didn't know how to fund. Sophia was the first person who ever believed in me, really believed. She was smart, ambitious, and fearless. We met at a food truck in East Austin. She was doing marketing for a tech startup. I was flipping tacos for 12 hours a day. We talked for 3 hours that night about flavors, about cities we wanted to visit, and someday, opening something of our own. We fell hard. Married within a year, and right after our wedding, we signed the lease on what would become our first restaurant. She helped design the logo, ran the front of house, managed our early social media. And in those first 2 years, before we had any real money or staff, she was right there beside me every single night. I'll never forget the look on her face the first time we turned a profit. She said, "David, we built something real." Together, and I believed her. But as the years passed, things started to shift. I kept my head down, working 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I was obsessed with perfecting the menu, the plating, the service. We grew from 5 employees to 30. We got great reviews. We opened a second location. I thought we were still building something, just had a bigger scale. But Sophia began stepping back. First it was, I just need a break. Then it became, I've got networking dinners or I'm meeting with a potential investor. Eventually, she stopped showing up at all. She said she didn't want to get in the way of the professionals. At first, I didn't question it. I figured we were just evolving. She had new interests. I was doing what I loved. We still came home to each other at night. We still had Sunday dinners. We still kissed goodbye every morning. But it wasn't the same. She stopped asking about the restaurant, stopped caring about staff issues, didn't attend staff parties or anniversary milestones. She'd smile and nod when I talked about new menu ideas, but her eyes would glaze over. It was like she was drifting further and further out to sea, and I kept yelling from shore, hoping she'd swim back. Still, I believed we could find our way again. That's why I planned something special for our 15th wedding anniversary. I cleared an entire night at the restaurant and reserved our best private dining room. I had my pastry chef create a custom dessert with the same flavors we had at our wedding cake. I asked the florist to recreate the bouquet Sophia carried when we got married. I even dug up an old playlist she once made for our road trips and had it quietly playing over the speakers. I wanted to remind her of who we were, of everything we'd fought for, of how far we'd come. But when I told her about the dinner, she hesitated. I'd love that she said. But I was wondering, would it be okay if Julian joined us? I blinked Julian. She smiled. You've never met him, but he's helped me a lot lately. He's sort of a mentor. Just business stuff. He's been giving me advice about investment planning and financial structuring. I didn't love the idea, but I also didn't want to seem insecure. Sure, I said, masking the discomfort. Three's fine. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her phone and texted him right there at the table. I told myself it was nothing, that she was just trying to show me. She still had value in the business world, that maybe Julian would see how strong our marriage was and feel a little awkward for even being there. But deep down, Something didn't sit right. And it wouldn't be long before that feeling turned into something much darker. Julian, even the name started to bother me. He didn't work in hospitality. He wasn't a sommelier. He wasn't a supplier. He was, from what Sophia said, a strategic growth consultant, whatever that meant. Someone who gave her vision, she said, someone who challenged her thinking. The more she mentioned him, the more I noticed how her tone shifted when she spoke about him. Light casual, little too rehearsed, like she'd already thought through how it would sound to me. Still, I kept it to myself. Until one afternoon I was going over the upcoming schedule with my head chef, Luis. We were planning out a menu change for the spring season, and I mentioned that Sophia wanted a new vegan tasting menu, something Julian had apparently suggested. Luis paused, knife still in hand, and raised an eyebrow. Julian, he asked slowly. Yeah, I said you know him. Luis gave me a look that said everything. He dried his hands, lowered his voice, and leaned in. I used to work for a guy named Julian Carter, he said. Downtown consulting firm. Lot of big clients, that him. I nodded. That's him. Luis hesitated. I'm not trying to start anything, but back then there were rumors. He got close to a few married clients, especially the ones with money tied to restaurants or boutique ventures. I blinked. You're saying he sleeps with clients? Luis didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. He just said, be careful, man. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking back to all the times Sophia had been at lunch with Julian, or working on a pitch deck, or exploring partnership opportunities. I thought about the way she dressed up for those meetings. Heels, makeup, perfume, when she hadn't put on lipstick for me in months. Something inside me cracked open. I didn't want to believe it, but I also couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called our head of security. We have a surveillance system installed throughout the restaurant, mostly for safety inventory and staff disputes. Footage is usually erased after a few weeks, but I asked him to check the archives for any recent visits from Sophia and Julian. 3 hours later, he sent me a USB drive. My hands trembled when I plugged it into my laptop. The first few clips showed nothing unusual. Sophia walking through the dining room chatting with a few staff. Julian arriving a few minutes later. They talked, they smiled, but then came the hallway footage. They didn't sit in the main dining area. They didn't even go to the bar. They slipped into the wine cellar, together once, twice, 5 times, always on afternoons, when I was out meeting vendors or visiting our second location. In one clip, Sophia looked over her shoulder before entering. Julian held the door open and placed his hand on her lower back, and in another, grainy but undeniable, he kissed her. Not on the cheek, not like a friend. A slow, deliberate kiss just out of the camera's center view, but unmistakable. I stared at the screen in silence. Everything went still. My heart, my hands, my breath. The woman I married. The woman I built a business with. The woman I trusted with everything was sneaking around in my restaurant, the one we built together. With him, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there and watched over and over again as the footage confirmed what my gut had been whispering for weeks. I thought that was rock bottom, but it wasn't. 2 days later, I found something worse. I accidentally opened the mail Sophia had left on the kitchen counter, thinking it was a vendor invoice, and found a letter from a divorce attorney. Inside was a list of potential asset divisions she discussed. She wanted half the restaurant, half the revenue, half the property, half the branding. She even claimed she was the creative director and co-founder, even though she hadn't shown up in 2 years, hadn't managed a payroll, hadn't hired a single chef, or crafted a single dish since year 3. She was preparing to gut the very thing I'd given my life to. And I realized something right then and there. This wasn't just an affair, it was a hostile takeover. I sat in my office, lights off, the blinds drawn, staring at the list Sophia's attorney had drafted. Property division, business equity, intellectual ownership, spousal compensation for unpaid emotional labor. That one hit me like a punch to the gut. Emotional labor. Was that what she called the first 2 years of helping me clean tables, pouring wine, and staying up late to balance books we barely understood? Was that what she called disappearing for the past 5 years, while I carried this business on my back? She was rewriting our history, turning memories into leverage, turning love into litigation. And suddenly I realized something chilling. This wasn't about Julian. He was just the side dish. This was about money control entitlement. Sophia had already left the marriage emotionally years ago. Now she was making her exit official and profitable. And me, I was the fool, still setting the table. Still thinking one romantic dinner could turn it all around. That night I didn't go home. I walked through the restaurant after hours alone. Every corner held a memory, our first health inspection certificate framed on the wall. The original copper pans we couldn't afford to replace the wine racks she once alphabetized by hand. It wasn't just a business. It was our story. And now she wanted to rip it in half like it was nothing more than an asset sheet. I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat at the chef's table, staring at the flickering tea light in the center. And that's when I made the decision. No more hoping. No more waiting. No more pretending this wasn't war. The next morning I called Marcus, my old business attorney. He helped me incorporate the restaurant years ago. Knew every clause, every change in ownership, every signature we'd ever made. When I explained what was happening, he didn't sound surprised. Tell me everything, he said. And I did. I showed him the footage. I told him about the letter I described Julian and the 3-person anniversary dinner Sophia had requested. I held nothing back. Marcus didn't blink. Just took notes, then he said something I'll never forget. You've been trying to save a marriage. She's been preparing a case. It was like a switch flipped in me. The man who walked into that meeting was heartbroken. The man who walked out was something else entirely. Over the next 2 weeks, we got to work. Marcus pulled all our official filings showing that Sophia hadn't been listed on any legal documents since year 4. She'd voluntarily relinquished her managerial role when we opened the second location. No salary, no shares, no responsibilities. We interviewed staff quietly, discreetly. They confirmed what I already knew. Sophia hadn't attended a single manager's meeting in years. Most of them barely knew her name. Marcus even brought in a forensic accountant who cross-checked the early bank records Sophia kept referencing in her emails to her attorney, claiming she'd provided equal investment in the beginning. It turned out she'd contributed around 12% of our initial capital. Important, yes, but nowhere near the 50% she claimed. We documented everything. Screenshots, testimonies, contracts, footage. Every narrative she tried to spin, we unraveled with receipts. It was exhausting. Emotionally brutal, but also strangely empowering. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in betrayal. I was swimming toward something solid, my future. And as our anniversary approached, Marcus and I crafted a plan. Let Sophia play her hand. Let her bring Julian. Let her walk into that room thinking she held the cards. And then show her the truth. Not with screaming, not with revenge, but with precision. Marcus called it surgical. I called it survival. We had everything ready: documents, evidence, witness statements, financial records, security footage. But it wasn't just about the paper trail. It was about the presentation, about hitting Sophia with the full weight of the truth at the precise moment she least expected it. The plan was simple. Let her walk into our anniversary dinner thinking she was in control. Let her believe I was still blind, still hopeful, still the same man she could quietly destroy without resistance. And then, let the lawyer do what lawyers do. I booked the private dining room for 7:00 p.m. The same room where we toasted our 10-year anniversary, the one with floor-to-ceiling wine racks, dim golden lighting, and that hand-carved mahogany table we'd saved for a year to afford. It was perfect. I ordered her favorite Cabernet. Had the chef prepare that ridiculous truffle pasta she always raved about. I even left a small envelope on the table addressed to Mrs. Sophia Hernandez just to make sure she'd sit down. Then at 6:45 p.m., I handed the room over to Marcus. I didn't stick around to watch. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity. Sophia had already made her choice. She'd written her exit strategy behind closed doors. All I did was open the door and turn on the lights. According to Marcus, she arrived right on time. Wearing red, Julian was with her, smug, confident, acting like he owned the place. Maybe Sophia had told him she was about to take half the business. Maybe he believed he'd soon be co-owner of one of Austin's most celebrated restaurants. But when they stepped into the dining room and saw Marcus, not me, sitting at the table with a black folder, their faces dropped. Sophia laughed at first. "Oh, this is a joke, right? Where's David Marcus?" stood. Calm, unshaken. "I'm here on his behalf," he said, sliding the folder across the table. "I suggest you read this carefully." Inside was a cleanly drafted divorce settlement agreement, prepared with precision, backed by documentation, and structured to protect every inch of the restaurant's assets. It offered Sophia a fair financial split based on her actual contributions from the early years, plus a one-time payment as a goodwill gesture. But it also included a clause: any attempt to claim further ownership or challenge the validity of David's sole management would be met with full counter litigation backed by hard evidence. Photos, emails, footage. Marcus laid it all out. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply presented the facts. Sophia opened her mouth to argue, but every time she tried, Marcus had an answer. When she said, "I built this with him," he showed the records of her removal from operations signed voluntarily by her. When she said, "I supported him emotionally for years," he pointed to tax returns and board meeting notes showing zero involvement. When she accused David of ambushing her, Marcus replied, "Your client approached divorce first." He's simply responding. But what really broke her was Julian. Because halfway through Marcus's presentation, when it became clear Sophia had no legal leverage, no controlling stake, no financial advantage, Julian went quiet, and then slowly he stood up. "I didn't sign up for this," he said under his breath. "Where are you going?" Sophia asked, voice rising. Julian didn't answer. He just walked out, leaving her sitting there, red dress glowing under soft lighting, face pale with realization. It was over. Not just the dinner, not just the marriage, but the illusion that she could manipulate her way into owning something she never earned. Marcus left the folder with her and exited. No screaming, no drama, just cold, undeniable truth. Back in my office, I waited. I knew she wouldn't come to me, not right away. Maybe not ever. But in that silence, something unexpected happened. Luis, my head chef, knocked on the door and stepped inside. "We heard what happened," he said. "Couple staff saw her leave in tears." I didn't respond. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "We got your back, chef. Whatever comes next, we're here." That night, for the first time in months, I slept through the night. No wine, no pills, no pacing, just quiet and strength. The next morning, Sophia didn't come home. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't even try to pretend nothing had happened. And honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in over a year, I didn't feel the weight of confusion pressing down on my chest. There was no second guessing, no knot in my stomach. Just silence. Clean, cold, freeing. Marcus told me she signed the agreement the following afternoon. No negotiation, no rebuttal. Just a quick, shaky signature and a mumbled request to have her privacy respected. He said she looked exhausted, like someone who just realized the script she'd been writing in her head was never going to be made into a movie. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just got back to work. Word got around the restaurant quickly, as it always does. I didn't confirm anything, but I didn't hide it either. Staff who had quietly watched Sophia stroll in and out of the wine cellar with Julian now seemed to understand everything. One of my servers, Amanda, she's been with us since the second year, left a note on my desk that read, "We saw more than we ever said. We stayed quiet because we didn't want to hurt you, but you handled it with class. We're proud to work here." I kept that note in my wallet, Julian. He vanished, deleted his social media accounts, pulled out of 2 investor events where he and Sophia were supposed to present a new restaurant expansion concept. I heard through whispers that Sophia had told him she was entitled to half of my business and that he believed her. Once he realized she had nothing to offer, he dropped her like a liability, and that more than anything was the fallout Sophia never expected. See, she didn't just lose the restaurant. She lost leverage, and for someone like Sophia, leverage was everything. Over the next few weeks, she tried reaching out through mutual friends, asked if I'd be willing to talk, said she wanted closure, but I wasn't interested in closure. I was interested in rebuilding, not the marriage myself. I expanded my time at the restaurant, took over a mentorship program for local culinary students. I started writing a column about sustainable sourcing for a regional food magazine. I even got a message from Lena Grant, a food critic who'd once roasted my risotto back in 2018, but who now said she admired the way I ran my kitchen and my ship. We met for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. It was easy. Honest, no games. Just two people who love food and hated dishonesty. One night over drinks, she asked me, "Do you ever regret how it all ended?" I thought about that for a long moment. "No," I said, "because if it hadn't ended, I'd still be fighting for something that only I cared about." She smiled and said, "Sounds like you're finally cooking for yourself again." And she was right. Sophia faded from public view for a while. I heard she tried to start a boutique branding agency, but it never got traction. Most of her contacts were people she'd met through me, people who now politely declined her calls. As for Julian, the last I heard, he moved to Scottsdale and started offering executive coaching retreats, whatever that means. Meanwhile, we launched our second location's renovation and added a private chef's table experience. Business boomed. And me, I stopped trying to hold together something that had already fallen apart. Instead, I built something new, something better, not for revenge, not for closure, but because I finally realized the most powerful thing you can do after betrayal is live a life so full they wouldn't even recognize the version of you that walked away. It's been almost 2 years since that dinner. Sometimes I still walk past that private room and feel a chill. Not from regret, but from remembering how close I came to losing everything I'd built, simply because I didn't want to believe the truth. Sophia and I don't speak anymore. There's nothing left to say. She once emailed me a short message: "I never thought you'd be that cold." I didn't respond because it wasn't coldness, it was clarity. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. The first time she showed me with every missed dinner, every half-truth, every step into that wine cellar that she'd left our marriage long before I ever realized it. The real heartbreak isn't the affair. It's waking up and realizing you were the only one still trying, but I'm not bitter. If anything, I'm grateful she forced me to grow in ways I never would have on my own, to lead with logic instead of pain, to stop romanticizing loyalty when it wasn't being returned. Today, the restaurant is thriving. We just opened a third location downtown, this one with a rooftop garden and a scholarship program named after my late mother, who always said real love doesn't need reminders. Lena and I are still together. She still critiques my risotto, but these days, she does it from across the dinner table at home, and me. I'm not chasing closure anymore. I'm living in peace. What did you think of this story? If you were in David's shoes, would you have played it the same way? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you support David, vote Dummersher 15 years strong. If you think Sophia had it coming, vote Darnasharn legal karma. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris so you never miss a powerful new karma story every single day.